My name is Noelle Carter. I'm 36 years old and I work as a logistics supervisor for a regional distribution company in Charlotte. My days start early. They end predictably. I've always preferred it that way. Structured, controlled, measurable. 5 years ago, before I got married, I bought my townhouse. The mortgage is in my name, the utilities are in my name, stability matters to me, and I built my life accordingly. Daniel, my husband, is 33. We've been married for 3 years, together for 5. He works in public relations for a hospitality group. Hybrid schedule, part office, part home. On paper, we made sense. In reality, it was more complicated. Daniel has a presence. In social settings, he's magnetic. People lean in when he talks. He knows how to read a room, how to adjust, how to charm. I used to admire that. At home, it translated differently. He corrected things, small things at first. The way I loaded the dishwasher, the way I organized the garage, the tone I used with his friends. It wasn't loud, it wasn't explosive, it was constant. I addressed it during our first year of marriage. I'm not going to live like I'm being evaluated every day, I told him one night. He apologized. He always did. And then, eventually, he reverted. About 6 weeks before everything ended, Daniel told me his ex-girlfriend had reached out. They had dated for 2 years before he met me. She's in Charlotte for work, he said casually, like it didn't matter. She wants to meet, just to get closure. Closure. I remember repeating the word in my head, trying to understand what exactly required resolution after 5 years of distance. What needs to be resolved, I asked him. It's just dinner, Noelle, he said. A conversation. It's healthy. When I pressed further, asked what they would be talking about, why now, his tone shifted. You're being insecure, he said, and honestly, a little controlling. That was his pattern. Any direct question became a flaw in me. I sat there for a moment, watching him, realizing this wasn't a discussion. It was a setup. The decision had already been made. He just needed me to either approve or look unreasonable. I don't approve, I said finally, but I'm not going to stop you. He smiled slightly. Not relief, not reassurance. Something closer to dismissal. You're overestimating how much this matters, he said. Maybe. Or maybe I was underestimating something else entirely. He booked the dinner for Saturday night. He spent longer than usual getting ready. Not overly formal, but deliberate. Thoughtful in a way he hadn't been with me in months. Before he left, he paused near the door. I'll be back by 11, he said. I nodded once. He walked out at 7 o'clock. At 10:30, I sent a message. Everything okay? He replied 20 minutes later. Dinner ran long. Still talking. No apology, no added context. Just that. Okay, I responded. At 11:30, I called once. It rang out. A few minutes later, a text came through. We moved somewhere else for drinks. Relax, Noelle. You don't need to hover. I stared at the screen for a few seconds. One text, one call. Hovering. That word stayed with me longer than it should have. At midnight, I stopped reaching out. Not because I wasn't paying attention, but because I was. There's a difference. Around 1:15, I saw his Instagram story. Dim lighting, a small table, 2 wine glasses, caption, full circle moments. He knew I followed him. That was the moment something shifted. Not emotionally, not dramatically. Just clearly. Closure doesn't usually look like that. It doesn't require multiple locations. It doesn't need an audience. At 1:30, I stood up, grabbed my keys, and drove to a 24-hour hardware store. The decision didn't feel impulsive. It felt inevitable. By 2:15, I was back home. By 2:40, the new deadbolt was installed. I had already checked everything earlier that week. Ownership, documentation, legal standing. The house was mine. There were no joint ownership claims. I didn't damage anything. I didn't throw anything away. I packed. Clothes, toiletries, his laptop, essentials. 2 suitcases. I placed them in the garage, near the driveway. On top, I left an envelope. His name written clearly across it. Inside, one sentence. Closure granted. At 2:57 a.m., my phone buzzed. Doorbell camera. I didn't go downstairs. I watched from my bedroom. Daniel walked up to the door, already looking irritated. He tried his key once. Then again. Then harder. He stepped back, checking the handle like the problem might be mechanical. It wasn't. After a few more attempts, I opened the garage remotely. The door lifted slowly. He turned toward the sound. He saw the suitcases. He stopped. Just stood there for a few seconds. Then his head tilted slightly, like he was trying to process what he was looking at. Then he looked directly at the camera. He knew I could see him. My phone started ringing. I let it. It stopped. Then rang again. Then again. Then the messages started. What is this? Noelle, open the door. Are you serious right now? The tone shifted quickly. You've lost your mind. You're humiliating yourself. Open the door before you make this worse. I stayed upstairs, still watching. After about 10 minutes, the knocking started. Loud, sharp, repetitive. I went downstairs, not to open the door, just close enough to speak. Your things are in the garage, I said through the door. We'll talk tomorrow, during normal hours. His voice cut through immediately. This is my house too, Noelle. No, I said calmly. It isn't. There was a pause. Not long, but noticeable. I didn't take anything from you, I continued. You have your essentials. If you think I've done something illegal, you're free to call the police. Silence again. Then quieter. It was just dinner. I leaned slightly against the door. Did closure require staying out until 3 a.m. and posting about full circle moments? He didn't answer that. Instead, you're insecure, he said. You're punishing me for having a past. I closed my eyes for a second. Not out of frustration, out of confirmation. I'm not punishing you, I said. I'm responding. A pause. Then clearly, we're done, Daniel. No yelling, no escalation. Just finality. The knocking didn't stop immediately. It changed. Less force, more rhythm, like he was trying to reset the tone, recalibrate the situation back into something he could manage. Noelle, Daniel called, his voice lower now. You're overreacting. Open the door and let's talk like adults. I stayed where I was, on the other side of the door, one hand resting lightly against the wood. I could hear the shift in him, the movement from anger into strategy. That was familiar. We will talk, I said evenly. Tomorrow, not like this. Another pause. You're seriously going to leave me outside at 3 a.m? Yes. There was no hesitation in my voice, not because it didn't matter, but because it did. Too much. You're being irrational, he snapped, the edge returning. You don't get to just decide something like this in the middle of the night. I already did. Silence again. Then softer, nothing happened. That line lingered in the air between us, not because I believed it, but because of how quickly he reached for it. Then you shouldn't have any trouble moving on, I replied. The next sound was different, not knocking. A dull thud, his palm against the door, not in anger, but in frustration, in disbelief. You're throwing away a marriage over one night. I exhaled slowly. No, I said. I'm ending a marriage because of what that night showed me. He didn't respond to that, not directly. Instead, he tried one last angle. You're going to regret this, he said. You're making a decision you can't take back. I'm aware. Another long pause. Then finally, the footsteps. Not loud, not dramatic, just retreating. I waited a few seconds, then walked back upstairs. From the bedroom window, I watched him. He stood in the driveway for a while, staring at his phone, probably trying to call again, trying to reach me through something I hadn't blocked yet. Then he moved. He loaded the suitcases into his car without looking back at the house. No shouting. No last attempt. Just calculation. At 3:20 a.m., his car pulled away. I turned off the exterior lights and went to bed. I slept for 2 hours. When my alarm went off at 6 o'clock, I got up. Shower. Coffee. Out the door by 6:45. Routine is a stabilizer. It gives you something to hold on to when everything else shifts. I didn't call in sick. I didn't text anyone. I didn't replay the night in my head. Not yet. At work, everything moved as usual. Emails, shipment schedules, vendor confirmations. Measured, structured tasks that didn't require emotion. During my first break, I checked my email. 3 messages, all from Daniel's work account. That was deliberate. Subject lines. We need to talk. This is unacceptable. You've gone too far. I opened the first one. The tone had changed again. Less shouting. More accusation. You had no legal right to lock me out. You embarrassed me. If you don't fix this immediately, I will escalate. I read all 3 messages. Then close them. No response. Instead, I opened a browser and searched for a family law attorney. I called during lunch, calmly. Factually, I own the property, I explained, purchased before marriage, solely in my name. I didn't damage anything. I didn't deny access to personal belongings. The receptionist listened, then responded carefully. As long as there was no destruction of property or threat of harm, you likely haven't committed a criminal offense. But you should speak directly with the attorney for specifics. I scheduled a consultation for the next morning. Control. Documentation. Sequence. Around 2 p.m., my phone buzzed. My older sister, Elise. What's going on? I stared at the message for a second before replying. What did he tell you? A pause. Then, that you locked him out for having dinner with a friend. That you're spiraling. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. I typed slowly. He went to dinner with his ex. stayed out until 3, posted about it, then stayed at her hotel. There was a long delay before she replied. Oh, that was all she said. Oh! I'll handle it, I added. She didn't push further. When I got home that evening, the driveway was empty. No car, no sign he had come back. Inside, the house felt different. Not emptier, just quieter. The absence wasn't loud. It was precise. I moved through the rooms, noticing small things. The absence of his shoes by the door, the empty space on the bathroom counter, the silence where there used to be background noise. I changed the garage code, updated the Wi-Fi password, removed his name from shared accounts, streaming services, utilities, administrative steps. Not symbolic, just necessary. At 9 p.m., there was a knock on the door. I didn't move immediately. Instead, I checked the doorbell camera. It wasn't Daniel. It was her, his ex-girlfriend. I had only seen her once before, years ago at a mutual event, but it was unmistakably the same woman. Early 30s, composed, holding her phone like she was debating whether to call or leave. She knocked again, lighter this time. I walked to the door and opened it, but kept the screen locked. What do you want? I asked. She blinked once, like she hadn't expected directness. I'm sorry to show up like this, she said. My name is Lauren. I think we should talk. Of course she did. That won't be necessary, I replied. She shifted slightly, adjusting her posture. Daniel is really upset, she continued. He said you overreacted. I just thought, maybe if we cleared things up. Cleared what up? I cut in. Her expression tightened for a fraction of a second. The dinner, she said. It was innocent. We got carried away talking, that's all. I watched her for a moment. Not what she was saying. How she was saying it. Measured. Prepared. You knew he was married, I said. Yes, she answered quickly. Of course. And you knew he told me he'd be home by 11? A pause. Small. But there. I assumed you were okay with us meeting, she said. There it was. The gap. He told you that, I asked? She hesitated, then nodded. He said you were fine with it, that you trusted him. I let that settle. Not because it surprised me, because it confirmed something I already knew. This wasn't one decision. It was a pattern. He misrepresented the situation, I said calmly, to both of us. She exhaled, like she had stepped into something deeper than she intended. I'm not trying to cause problems, she said. I just thought... If you want to help him, I interrupted, stay out of it. Her lips pressed together slightly. Then she tried again. He's staying at my hotel, she said. Just temporarily. He didn't have anywhere else to go. That was new, and not subtle. He had options, I said. He made a choice. She didn't respond to that. Instead, she studied me, like she was trying to understand why I wasn't reacting the way she expected. No anger, no raised voice, just certainty. I think you're making a mistake, she said finally. I don't, I replied. Another pause. Then she nodded once. Not agreement, acknowledgement. Okay, she said quietly. Then she turned and walked away. I closed the door and locked it. 5 minutes later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it ring once, then sent it to voicemail. A text followed immediately. Blocking me is immature. We need to talk. I stared at the screen, then set it down. A minute later, another message. I'm at Lauren's hotel because I have nowhere else to go. You forced this. I picked up the phone this time. Typed once. All communication moving forward will be through email. Logistics only. No emotion. No debate. Just terms. His reply came instantly. Are you seriously ending a marriage over dinner? I looked at the message, then answered. It's not about dinner. 3 dots appeared. Then, you're trying to control the narrative. If you file for divorce, I'll make sure people know what you did. I leaned back slightly. There it was. The shift again. From defense to threat. You're free to tell anyone you want, I typed. I have timestamps, footage, and screenshots if facts are needed. This time the typing stopped. No immediate reply. An hour passed. Then, when can I get the rest of my things? The first practical question, I answered simply. Saturday, noon. I'll have everything ready. After a moment, another message appeared. Bringing a witness would be dramatic. I didn't respond, because the plan wasn't up for negotiation. Saturday came faster than expected. Not because time moved quickly, but because everything between Wednesday and Saturday was stripped down to essentials. No conversations, no arguments, no attempts at repair. Just logistics. I met with the attorney Friday morning, in person. Clean office, neutral tones, everything deliberate. Like my own preferences reflected back at me in a different setting. We went through timelines. Ownership documents. Financial separation. What matters, she said, tapping her pen lightly against a notepad, is consistency. What you say, what you document, what you do, it all needs to align. It does, I replied. And it did. By the time I left, the process was already in motion. Paperwork drafted. Next steps outlined. No ambiguity. Saturday, 11:30 a.m., Caleb arrived. A friend, not overly involved in my personal life, but steady. Observant. The kind of person who doesn't insert himself into situations unnecessarily. He stepped inside, glanced around once, then looked at me. You sure about this? He asked. Yes. No hesitation. He nodded and stayed in the living room while I moved the last of Daniel's belongings into the garage. Clothes, shoes, office supplies. Everything labeled. Everything accounted for. I didn't touch his personal documents. Passport, birth certificate, financial statements. Those were placed in a separate folder, ready to be handed over directly. At exactly 12 p.m., a car pulled into the driveway. I didn't need to check the camera. I already knew. I opened the garage before they could knock. The engine cut off. The driver's side door opened first. Lauren stepped out. That was deliberate. Daniel followed from the passenger side. Also deliberate. They wanted a reaction. They didn't get one. Caleb remained visible inside the house, standing casually but clearly present. Daniel walked into the garage without looking at me. No greeting. No acknowledgement. His eyes moved quickly over the boxes, scanning for gaps, inconsistencies, like he was expecting to find something missing. You took everything? He asked, his tone flat. Yes. If something's missing, email me a list. Procedural. Nothing more. He let out a quiet breath through his nose. You're really doing this, he said. I am. Lauren stayed near the car, watching but not approaching. That, at least, was a change. Daniel started loading the boxes into the trunk. No rushing. No dramatics. Just movement. Calculated, controlled. Halfway through, he stopped and turned toward me. There's really no way back from this, he asked. No. No pause. No reconsideration. Just truth. He studied my face for a second, not searching for emotion, searching for weakness. He didn't find it. This is about pride, he said. You're throwing everything away because you want to prove a point. I shook my head slightly. No, I said, this is about patterns. He frowned. Nothing happened, he repeated. There were decisions, I replied. Multiple ones, sequential. You made them without hesitation. His jaw tightened. You're acting like I cheated. I'm acting like trust shifted, I said, and I don't negotiate that back into place. That landed, not emotionally, structurally. Because it wasn't something he could argue against. It wasn't about proving facts. It was about standards. He tried one more angle. You could have waited, he said. Handled it privately, like a normal person. I did handle it privately, I said. There was no audience. He let out a short, humorless laugh. Locking me out at 3 a.m. isn't exactly subtle. It was clear, I corrected. That ended that thread. He turned back to the car and continued loading. When he reached the last box, I stepped forward and handed him the folder. Your documents, I said. He took it without looking inside. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, are you going to tell people, he asked. If they ask, I'll tell the truth, I said. Nothing more. He nodded slowly. Not agreement. Calculation. Then he walked to the passenger side and got in. Lauren didn't look at me as she started the engine. The car reversed out of the driveway. No pause. No final moment. Just departure. Caleb stayed for another 30 minutes. Long enough to confirm there would be no return. Long enough to ask one more time. You're sure? Yes. When he left, the house settled again. Not empty. Just resolved. That evening, I finalized the retainer with my attorney. Authorized the filing for Monday morning. Sunday night, a message came through. Not emotional, not reflective. Direct. How are you planning to handle support? I stared at the screen for a moment. There it was. The next phase. Expectation. Assumption. Whether I expected him to start over with nothing, the phrasing was telling. I didn't respond immediately. I forwarded the message to my attorney. Monday morning, she called. Given the length of the marriage, 3 years, no children, both employed, you're likely looking at temporary, minimal support at most. That matched what I expected. I replied to Daniel. We'll follow whatever the court determines. Nothing more. He pushed back. I sacrificed career momentum for this marriage. That wasn't accurate. He had changed jobs once, for a higher salary. Better title. Better position. But I didn't debate it. I didn't need to. Documentation would speak. And documentation doesn't argue. By Wednesday, he had hired an attorney. That told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a negotiation anymore. It was a process. A formal request came through. temporary access to retrieve any overlooked items. I agreed, with conditions. Scheduled. Supervised. No exceptions. In the meantime, people started reaching out. Carefully. Some asked directly. Some circled around it. Some had already heard his version first. I kept my responses consistent. He went to dinner with his ex, stayed out until 3, stayed at her hotel the next night. After that, I ended it. No embellishment, no emotion, just sequence. One friend mentioned, "He's telling people you blindsided him." I nodded slightly. Anyone who wants context can ask me. That was enough. The hearing was scheduled quickly. No theatrics, no raised voices, just paperwork, numbers. Dates! My attorney focused on documentation, purchase date of the house, separate ownership, timeline of events. His attorney focused on framing, but framing without contradiction doesn't hold. The judge reviewed everything, income statements, assets, length of marriage, then made a decision, temporary orders, short-term support, 3 months, finite, no shared claim to the house. Clear, simple, final for now. Daniel didn't look at me during the hearing, not once. Afterward, in the hallway, he approached. "Are you satisfied?" he asked. I looked at him for a moment, not with anger, not with regret, just clarity. "This isn't about satisfaction," I said. "It's about closing something that no longer works." He held my gaze for a second. "Then, you could have handled that night differently." "Maybe," I said. Then I walked away. After that, everything moved the way processes are supposed to move. Quietly, deliberately, without emotion attached to each step. The divorce didn't explode, it didn't drag, it didn't twist into something unpredictable. It followed documentation, it followed timelines. It followed what had already been set in motion the moment I stood behind that door and said we were done. Over the next 2 months, the legal process unfolded exactly as my attorney had outlined. Assets were divided based on records. There were no hidden accounts, no last-minute discoveries, no sudden reversals. The townhouse remained mine, premarital property, clearly documented. The temporary support payments were processed automatically and ended exactly on schedule. 3 months. Finite, predictable, controlled. Communication stayed where I had placed it from the beginning. Email, legal channels, no phone calls, no personal conversations, no revisiting the past under the disguise of closure. That word had already lost its meaning. If anything, it had revealed more than it ever resolved. Friends adjusted. Some drifted toward him. Some stayed neutral. Some came to me quietly, asking careful questions, trying to understand what actually happened beneath the version they had heard first. I didn't correct anyone aggressively. I didn't defend myself. I repeated the same sequence. He went to dinner with his ex, stayed out until 3, stayed at her hotel the next night. After that, I ended it. Nothing more, nothing less. People fill in the gaps themselves when you give them structure instead of emotion. About 5 months after everything was finalized, I heard something through a mutual acquaintance. Not directly, just information passing through the same quiet channels everything else had. Daniel and Lauren weren't together anymore. No details, no explanation, just over. I didn't ask why. I didn't need to. Some patterns resolve themselves without your involvement. By then, my life had already settled into something new. Not dramatically different, just cleaner. Work stayed the same. Early mornings, predictable schedules, clear expectations. I went back to the gym consistently. Evenings became quieter, not in a way that felt empty, but in a way that felt uninterrupted. There's a difference between silence and peace. I learned that slowly. The house didn't feel like something I had protected. It felt like something that had returned to its intended state. Ordered. Stable. Mine. I didn't think about him often. Not because I was forcing myself not to, but because there was nothing left to process. No unanswered questions. No unresolved conversations. The answers had already been given. Just not in words. In actions. In sequences. In choices made without hesitation. That was enough. One evening, about 6 months after everything ended, I was sitting at the kitchen counter with a cup of coffee, going through emails when I paused for a moment. Not because something triggered it, just a thought passing through. Could I have handled that night differently? The answer came easily. Yes. I could have waited. I could have argued. I could have asked for explanations the next morning. I could have given him the opportunity to explain, to minimize, to reframe, to apologize. I could have turned one night into a long negotiation about intent, about perception, about what really happened. I could have stayed in something that required constant interpretation instead of clarity. But I didn't. Because the moment I saw the pattern, not the words, not the excuses, but the pattern, I understood something I hadn't fully accepted before. Trust for me isn't gradual. It isn't something that fades slowly and can be rebuilt through effort or discussion. It's structural. It's either intact or it isn't. And once it shifts, I don't negotiate it back into place. That doesn't make me cold. It doesn't make me rigid. It makes me consistent. There's a difference. People think decisions like that are made in anger. They're not. They're made in clarity. Anger is loud. Clarity is quiet. That night wasn't about punishment. It wasn't about proving a point. It was about recognizing a pattern and choosing not to live inside it. That's all it was. And that was enough.